Well, in the last few days, British long-range Storm Shadow missiles have been fired fairly deep into Russia. The same has happened with American missiles. This is the first time in 1,000 days that this has happened. Keir Starmer at the G20 today saying it's the right thing to do because it puts Ukraine in the strongest possible position to win. Now, it was interesting in Westminster today, listening to the Labour government, the Conservative opposition, the Liberal Democrats. Everybody still seems to think that if we give Ukraine enough weaponry, that somehow they're going to win this war. And yet, when I get outside of Westminster and talk to ordinary folk, I've not met anybody in the last month who thinks Ukraine is ever going to win. And I do wonder, right at this time, whether it's the wise thing to do. Well, Catherine Foster of GB News spoke to Leader of Opposition Kemi Badenoch just a few hours ago. This was her view on the use of the missiles.
If those missiles have been fired into Russia, you're supportive of that?
This is not an easy thing. We would like it for there not to be any war. But getting concerned about a war being fought using British missiles at a time when we believe that Ukraine is fighting for all of Europe, in my view, is not the right way to look at things. Do we want Ukraine to win this war or not? And are we prepared to support them to win this war? That is what I believe.
Well, I think through an interpreter, you might say she just about supports the decision, but it wasn't particularly clear. I worry about this, and I worry because I think the idea Ukraine's going to win, frankly, is for the birds. I think the war has gone on for long enough. I think the casualties are massive. I think all we're doing is helping to prolong a stalemate. That's my view, and it has been actually for some time. But strategically, Donald Trump, in 59 days' time, will be in the White House. He is committed to negotiating a peace settlement. No one quite knows what that might look like, but that is what he's committed to do. Is the use of American and British long-range missiles going to help him in that process or make it more difficult? And are we wise at this very moment in time to be allowing our missiles to be fired deep into Russia? Love to get some of your views on that, please. Farage at gbnews.com. I'm joined in the studio by Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, Conservative Member of Parliament for Chingford and Woodford Green. I'm also joined by Kwasi Kwarteng, former Tory MP and Chancellor, and Lloyd Russell-Moyle, former Labour MP. Ian, Boris is doing it as well. Boris says Ukraine's going to win. It's not, is it?
Well, can I just declare an interest here? I have a charity that works feeding people right behind the front line. I visited on a number of occasions. I'm going out there. It's sometime soon, I hope. I've seen the devastation that's been wrought by the Russians. It is quite beyond belief, and you have to be there to see it. Bodies still lying around, can't be retrieved, shelling directly and deliberately of ordinary people's homes. The problem has been that Ukraine has had to fight this war with two hands tied behind its back. Russia has been able to lob directed missiles at every single part of Ukraine, civilian areas, cities, etc. Ukraine has not been able to return the favour. You can't win a war unless you fight a full war. There's no such thing as a limited war gives you anything at all. So this decision probably should have been taken well over a year to 2 years ago, because what's happened is they have been constrained. That has meant that Russia has been able to put its supply depots much closer to the front line, which is critical in resupply, its airfields much closer to deliver those cruise missiles and those rockets, and their missile sites much closer, the mobile ones. So what you're trying to do here, if you give them these longer-range missiles and allow them to use this, is to drive that Russian set of territories and resupply, rockets, all the rest of it further back, much further back, making it much more difficult for them to do their targeting and their resupply. So with that poor resupply, then the Russians who are on the advance in Ukraine find it very difficult because they will be running out of ammunition. It's very difficult to get it to when you can get pounded on the resupply. Ukraine has not been allowed to do that. You target. Well, I was in army. I was in the army. You target those supply lines ruthlessly to make sure that supply stops. Once it stops, the front line begins to go wobbly, and that's where it is. So when you ask me the simple question, can they win the war? It is, of course, feasible for Ukraine to win the war. It's much tougher now for them to do it because of the failure of the West to understand what it takes to win a war.
Well, it takes troops to win a war.
It takes troops, but it also takes weapons.
I mean, given they're running out of men, would you send British troops to Ukraine?
No, I don't believe the whole point about Ukraine right now is by supplying it and giving it the weaponry, you do not run the risk, therefore, having to put boots on the ground. That is the key. If you don't do this, we will be having boots on the ground.
So you're not worried about provocation? You're not worried about an unstable Putin responding excessively? I mean, he's launched this new nuclear doctrine.
I know, Nigel.
We can't ignore it completely.
No, I understand this completely. Of course there is a risk. War is brutal, but it is full of risk. And you make choices and you take chances and you have to decide what will happen on the other side, but you can never predict it. My point about Putin is Putin started this war thinking it was an easy walkover. It hasn't turned out. He's lost hundreds of thousands of soldiers, civilians, etc., slightly better protected than the Ukrainians. But the main point to make about this is Putin, if he succeeds in taking what he wants and in basically taking over even a large chunk of Ukraine, the problem we've got then is that becomes the key message to every single totalitarian state that we already now are under attack from. China has caught his eyes on this. They're supplying him with weaponry through North Korea. Their idea is they're going for Taiwan. Now, here's the point about Taiwan. 72% of everything made in the world today is made in the area around Taiwan, a bit of China, and down into the South China Sea.
This is the semiconductors particularly.
But more than that, everything made, Nigel, that we use every day, 72% is now located in that area. One blockade or an attack on Taiwan, £12 trillion or dollars worth, $12 trillion of hit to the global economy. Ukraine was worth $1 trillion. This is on a scale.
Oh, no, I get that.
So my point really is right now,
that.
they are working together, all these states, Iran, North Korea, China, Russia. So there's more at stake here over Ukraine. And what has angered me, I'll be honest with you, is the utter hopeless failure of Europe and also the US, but the US better than Europe, to get a grip and an idea about what do you want. There's been no strategic idea. Do you really want them to win or not?
I mean, there is a way of stopping...
And the holdback means I don't know if I want them to win.
There is a way of stopping Putin, of course. It's you get into the negotiating table, you agree a settlement on territory, and you then give NATO guarantees, absolute guarantees, to Ukraine, and that says to Putin, that's it.
But here's the key. I understand that. Sit down with rational people, reach a rational deal. I don't think Putin is rational at the moment because, of course, he has got so much hurt in Russia. He has to succeed in being able to tell the Russians.
But Ian, that's fine.
But let me... Can I just finish off?
Alistair, that's fine.
Yeah, but I was going to bring in Trump on this one.
Go on. Well, I'll tell you what, we'll bring in Trump in a second.
OK.
What I want to say is this. I get all that, but very powerful polling.
I know.
Out from Ukraine today, by a very large margin, Ukrainian citizens want an end to this war. Ukrainian citizens want a negotiated peace. And even if Putin is irrational, isn't it still right to try to get him to the table?
Yes, but the key thing is how do you get him to the table on terms that are acceptable one way or the other? And this is the point. If you do it on the back foot, if Ukraine goes to the table in a weak position, the claims will be more than already exist today. Putin is not going to hang back. He's going to say, well, you're on the back foot, you don't agree this deal, we're taking further action. He's got nothing in that sense to lose. So Ukraine's problem right now is that the West hasn't figured out whether it ever wanted them to win or even to get a stalemate. So the West is the designer of this problem. Now, with a new president coming in...
In 59 days.
Exactly right. My view about President Trump is very simple. He never really lets anybody know what he really wants or thinks. That keeps people like Putin on the edge of not knowing. If he's going to help sort this out, what he'll have to do is say to Putin, which he said, I think, a few weeks ago, don't you increase this war. He gave him a very serious warning. He even talked about the troops, the facilities they've got in Europe. That was a very stark message to Putin. So if I was Trump, and I hope he will do this, he will say, the only way this gets decided is if you start moving back and we separate the pair of you, and then we can have a discussion. My main point here, and he may do this, I don't know, I'm not going to guess what he does.
Sure.
But I simply say, at the end of it all, Ukraine in a state of complete weakness is not going to be a partner in a negotiation.
Right. Ian makes the point there, that Trump said, just slow down here. And at that very moment, and a few weeks before Trump comes in, we decide to start firing missiles deep into Russia. Is that a wise thing to do?
Look, I worry that we haven't quite worked out the strategy. out of this. And Ian is right to some extent. We've come to this too late, and now we're flailing around, partly, I think, because Biden and others know that they're going to be out soon, and they want to make sure Ukraine is on the front foot. That's all well and good. But where's the end strategy? Where are the red lines that they're willing? There's got to be a negotiation at the end of this. There will have to be some territory ceded at the end of this. Crimea will have to be normalised, and some of the other bits of territory. That's just the reality. But to tell you the truth, I said that within the first month of this war happening, that would be where we ended up. And so the real reason that we needed Ukraine to succeed is because we, Russia and America, signed an agreement when Ukraine agreed to give up their nuclear weapons to say we would protect its territorial integrity. And if we allow Ukraine to be completely done over, the danger is other countries that are looking at either getting nuclear weapons or who have the ability but haven't yet will say, well, that giving up and reassurances that Russia, Britain and America gave to protect Ukraine didn't work. The only thing that protects you is to have a nuke yourself. And that will be a dangerous proliferation. So I do think Ukraine needs to come out on top, but it doesn't mean that they need to win every single point down the line.
No. I mean, Ian makes some very powerful points, particularly about supply lines and why these Storm Shadow missiles can be useful. I just question the timing.
Look, so I think Sir Ian is absolutely right. We didn't know, as the West, what we wanted out of this thing. And so what we've done is we've dilly-dallied, and now at the 11th hour we've given them these weapons. You're quite right. We should have done it earlier because, as dare I say, Kemi said, after all the waffle she started with, if I may say so. But her question is at the end were very pertinent. Do we want Ukraine to win? Yes, most of us do. And what can we do to help them win? Now, in the reality, they're not going to get 100% of what they want. But as Sir Ian said, they've got to be in the strongest position. And we've seen this before. I remember when Obama came in 2009, Israel then attacked Gaza because there's that 2-month transition period when the new president comes in. And it's very critically important that Ukraine is in the strongest possible position ahead of any deal that President Trump might broker. So there is a logic to helping them at this point.
OK, final word, Sir Ian. As you said, we never quite predict what Trump's thinking, what he's going to do. Do you think he has a chance of reaching a reasonable, fair settlement?
I think in due course, yeah, I think so. I think one of my problems with Biden has been I don't think he ever he understood what he really wanted. He knew what he didn't want, but never what he wanted. And I think this is the problem. When you're in a war, you have to have some clear strategic thinking. And whatever else one thinks, and people have different views about Trump, quite often different from what the reality is. The key thing about him is he's coming in with a huge mandate. I mean, this is a president that won all the swing states, who got the popular vote. Yeah. There's no question now about whether he had the right to govern. So, and with the Congress and the Senate with him, I think there's a fair chance he can turn to Russia or whatever and hit the table pretty hard and say, this stops, and you're going to listen to what this is about. Because I think... being in that strong position, the signal goes wide to all the totalitarian states. If we give in and make a weak presence with this is just going to perpetuate everywhere else.
Well, I hope you're
Nuclear
right.
weapons, more invasions, Taiwan.
On all of those counts, I hope you're right, Sir Ian. Thank you very much indeed.